All right, so we should be able to finish today that part. And after that, depending on the printer temperament today, we will be able to read a little more on the breviary and the Martyrology, because I remember that I actually had an article on that. It's something I advise you in general anyway, like as a seminarian and as a priest, you want to have binders with different subjects, and then it depends on you know what your inclination is, I suppose, or also your duties and providence, basically. But it's good to continue throughout your life to accumulate different kinds of research, because when something comes up, you have an answer right away. So concerning the Martyrology, what happens is actually I had an article on the authority of the Martyrology, which is quite interesting, and the authority of the breviary, but it's in French. So I tried to do as quick as possible a translation of that, but it takes forever. And so it's almost, you almost have everything except for the end of the conclusion. I will finish it during the day and give you back like a complete version of it. But for now, we'll get basically most of it. And also, while I was in the seminary, at some point something came up with the saints in the Martyrology as well. Basically, there was a question as to whether you could take any saint in the Martyrology and use that as a patron saint for a church or a work or something like that. So in any case, at the time, what I did is go to the SRC decree and look for anything I could find on that subject. So always, again, keep those, because you never know. You might use them again. So I have like SRC decrees on different, basically the strength of the Martyrology and the strength of what you can do with the saints in the Martyrology. So I have a number of decrees here. I'm not going to give you that because not everybody might be interested in that, but if somebody wants, you can make a copy. And also, if somebody wants the French original of the article, because my English translation is quick and not the best, so you could also have that if you ask me for it. In the meantime, we will have the printer make a quick copy of this article. Right. So that should be printed when we are done with where we left. So, all right, let's go back to the notes here. So we talked about the fact that religious orders, when they are definitely approved, are also an infallible decision from the Church. So conclusion of the chapter. To sum up, the Church is infallible in her universal discipline, and particularly in her liturgy, insofar as this discipline cannot be dangerous to faith and morals, but is always holy and conducive to our eternal salvation. This is absolutely certain, especially since Pius VI and the Council of Trent condemned the opposing errors. And as I told you, it's not enough to say that the discipline of a church or the liturgy of a church is not evil, but you actually have to say and hold that it's actually sanctifying, that it's actually a good thing. The Church is also infallible in solemn canonizations and in the final approval of religious orders. This is the common teaching of theologians, and it is absolutely certain. The infallibility of a church in canonizations was even taught by Pope Pius XI and Pius XII on many occasions. What is wrong with this thing? Not only should we not reject the discipline of our Holy Mother Church, but we should esteem and venerate it, as Pope Pius XII reminds us in the encyclical Mystici Corporis. He says, "But lest we be deceived by the angel of darkness, who transforms himself into an angel of light, let this be the supreme law of our love, to love the spouse of Christ as Christ willed her to be, and as he purchased her with his blood. Hence, not only should we cherish exceedingly the sacraments with which Holy Mother Church sustains our life, the solemn ceremonies which she celebrates for our solace and our joy, the sacred chant and the liturgical rites by which she lifts our minds up to heaven, but also the sacramentals and all those exercises of piety by which she consoles the hearts of the faithful and sweetly imbues them with the Spirit of Christ. Okay, give me 1 second. I don't know what is going on with this machine. Oh, okay, no paper. That's what is going on. All right. As her children, it is our duty not only to make a return to her for her maternal goodness to us, but also to respect the authority which she has received from Christ, in virtue of which she brings into captivity our understanding and to the obedience of Christ. Thus, we are commanded to obey her laws and her moral precepts, even if at times they are difficult to our fallen nature, to bring our rebellious body into subjection through voluntary mortification, and at times we are warned to abstain even from harmless pleasures. So, for example, fasting, discipline, obviously. All right. Any question on this chapter? Yes? Basically, the process of canonization is somewhat recent. So the way that a saint would be canonized, or the way at least that you would know for certain that the infallibility of a church is engaged, is if the saint had universal veneration in the church. Basically, if a universal church would have a saint in the calendar, and we celebrate the feast day of a saint, then you can be for certain it's the same as a solemn canonization. So, for example, Saint Peter was actually never canonized. You know, there was never like a process made, obviously, right? But it would be, it would be heretical to deny that he's a saint. I mean, a number of saints like that in the calendar. Usually, the martyrs, you know, the early church saints, have never been canonized as such for most of them. So that it works that way. But actually, this is addressed in this article. So though here you have a Pious Conclusion, which summarizes everything and puts it into perspective to basically try to see to admire the work of God. We can't really read it together because it's more for your edification. So you can use that tomorrow for meditation or something. No, I'm kidding, but you do what you want. But it's just to put everything into perspective. Basically, just the fact that the church is established for our salvation, and by obeying the church, we go to heaven because that's what the church was made for. It's pretty simple. And so the assistance of the Holy Ghost covers that. That's the principle, and then it's applied in different situations. But basically, again, I insist on that. We have said that many times already. That to the idea that somehow there will be like a category of something that the Holy Ghost wasn't warned about, or something like there was a way by which the hierarchy escaped the protection of the Holy Ghost. Doesn't make any sense at all. It's actually completely absurd. Like, it means you have absolutely understand nothing about what the church is about. Because you're trying to basically find a way by which the church becomes a means of domination. That's basically what it is. It doesn't make any sense. It's actually a blasphemy to say that. All right, it looks like we might be able to read this article, because we also have the ecclesiastical faith, but this is short and interesting, so I think it would be good if we started with that. Okay, I hope I don't mix it up. So how is that working? Why is that in reverse? Oh no, because this doesn't have page number and it's a mess. Martyrology. Okay, this is good. Somebody wants to come and help distribute? Thank you. Alright, this is good. Alright, okay. Alright, got it. Okay. Well, actually, wait, I should have punched it first. The ecclesiastical faith article is very interesting, but this will be quick, so we can probably do that first, since we addressed this question yesterday. So who hasn't had it yet? So this is to be placed as an appendix. Again, the third page, or number 5 and 6 if you want, I'm going to give you a new version as soon as I actually finish to translate the conclusion. But the body of the article is there, and we have all the essentials, so we can do that today. Everything is good here. Okay. Good. Again, if you want the original French, you can ask me after class. Done here or what? Okay. Sorry. All right. So, authority of the Roman Martyrology and Breviary. So that's exactly what we needed. Eh? It's written by a Jesuit. You don't have the name because it's at the end, and I haven't actually added it yet. But Montrousier. Well, here it is. I think it's Henri, but I'm not sure. Montrousier. I think, I mean, I don't know too much about this author. I haven't had the time to check more, but I think he's, you know, a respected author. And you will see by what he says that he's not a modernist. So, authority of the Roman Martyrology and Breviary. So this is translated from the French, Autorité du Martyrologe et du Breviaire romain, which was published in October 1871, so it's pretty old, in the Revue des Sciences Ecclésiastiques. Very recently, the Sacred Congregation of Rites issued a decision very important in itself and which acquires a new gravity by the confirmation and the not added by the Sovereign Pontiff, meaning Pope Pius IX. Here are the facts. One of the Bollandis, everybody knows what the Bollandis are or not? It's like a French society of learned people who are basically doing the same as Butler, as far as, in the sense that they are researching the lives of the saint and writing their stories, basically. It's it's an old institution. It actually does exist to this day. I don't know what the value of it is, but in a sense that if you type Bollandis, actually they have a website, and there are some Bollandis today. I would not trust them too much, but it's a very famous thing, at least in the French speaking world. Anyway, they just basically are specialized in research concerning lives of the saints. So one of the Bollandis, one of them, treating for the day of October 29th of the Acts of Saint Eusebia, Domnus and Domnionus, martyrs, venerated in Bergamo as the city patron saints, thought that he could call into doubt, so there are plenty of mistakes there, he could call into doubt the existence of the martyrdom of these holy protectors. The Bishop of Bergamo, rightly concerned of the effect that the announcement of such a discovery could produce in the minds of the faithful, quickly reached out to the Sacred Congregation of Rites and submitted the following question: an argumenta alata provent in casu. That means whether the arguments which are brought forth prove in this case. So are they actually proving something? So whenever you have, for the new seminarians, whenever you have like a doubt in liturgy or concerning the faith also, but particularly for practical things, you would just send a dubium to the Holy See, and then you would get an answer. So one day we have to go to the library and see how that works. In any case, the Bishop of Bergamo decided, wow, this is really bad, so he wrote to the Holy See. He's like, is that real? Should I take that into consideration? So the Sacred Congregation examined the case with the greatest diligence, and while giving a deserved tribute to the gigantic works and immense services of the Bollandists, in general, he's not speaking about that one obviously, but in general, they did a good job. The answer was the following: argumenta alata adversus traditionem quae respicit sanctus martires de quibus agito nihil probant. So they prove nothing. Basically, the congregation said, forget it. The tradition is there, don't just deny it with, a balloon of hot air. Just you need something strong. So Pope Pius IX confirmed the decision, adding the following recommendation, whose scope is evident. So he actually added, basically he was a little bit troubled by that, in the sense that he was thinking, there are some people who are going to deny things with not enough reasons. So he wanted to warn the scholars concerning that. So that's why he himself basically took the matter in his hands. So he says, mandavit, so the decree says, mandavit in super sanctitas sua, ut admoneantur omnes cultores studiorum historiae ecclesiasticae et sacrae archaeologiae, ut quandocunque agitur de sanctis vel beatis, qui approbante sancta sede sunt in possessione publici cultus ecclesiastici, caute se gerant. So just for the new seminarians, His Holiness has furthermore commended that be warned all of the basically people doing research, scholars of ecclesiastical history and sacred archaeology, that whenever they treat of saints or blessed who enjoy a public veneration in the church with the approbation of the Holy See, that they behave very carefully, cautiously, and that they always have the rules before their eyes, the rules given by Benedict XIV in the Apostolic Letters concerning the new edition of the Roman Martyrology, and there he gives the numbers, and then he also refers to the books of Benedict XIV, which are very well known concerning the beatification and canonization of saints. So Pope Benedict XIV was a scholar himself, and he wrote a number of books as a private doctor. So he was a theologian before being a pope, basically, and he wrote a number of things, and he's very well known for having discussed at length of the canonization and beatification of saints. So this is what is referred to here by Pope Pius IX. And also before that, the Apostolic Letter, so that is as a pope now, not just as a private theologian, but as a pope, he did oversee a new edition of the Roman Martyrology. And to this day, that Apostolic Letter is at the beginning. If you check the Martyrology in the church, look at the beginning, you have that Apostolic Letter in there. And it's very interesting to read, actually. So I would advise that you have a look at it. And then another section where it speaks about the Roman Breviary. So in any case, he's basically saying follow the rules that were laid down by Benedict XIV. So we have thus been warned. The Holy See has declared that the writer treating historical studies must take into account the traditions of the Church and the monuments attesting to them. So monuments, don't think necessarily just like a stone thing, but basically it means also books and things left from the past. The Pope refers us especially to the doctrine of Benedict XIV on the article of the Roman Martyrology and Breviary. Let us therefore seek the intimate thought of this learned pontiff. So Monrouzier goes on, he goes to those sources which are given by Pope Pius IX and looks at what Benedict XIV says, basically. So let's move on. It is not necessary to say that the Martyrology and the Breviary... Okay, sorry, something... are. Well, yes, I mean they are. Oh, okay. No, that's correct. It is not necessary to say what the Martyrology and Breviary are. And we are glad we don't have to do that because we'll be losing our time. But it will probably not be useless to observe that the authority of the Martyrology is not, far from it, as great as that of a breviary. So he makes that distinction. Benedict XIV expresses this very clearly, teaching that the Martyrology only contains historical details of the life and death of Christian heroes. Do you always put Christian with a uppercase C when it's like that? Okay. All right. So here is a quote of Benedict XIV. So I left the Latin when the article would just quote the Latin. So for the sake of the young seminarians, I'm just going to translate it like that. So he says basically it was disputed and it's still disputed whether the scriptio, it should be not description, sorry, the scriptio, whether the inscription in the Martyrology signifies ecclesiastical worship. So you have the reference here. He says basically, if somebody wants to have my opinion, I would say, number one, that the inscription of a name in the Roman Martyrology pertains to historical facts, basically, the history of facts. And secondly, that it has to be read in the choir, but that from the inscription of a name or from the reading in the choir, if we look at the nature of both of those things, you cannot infer an argument basically saying that it would pertain to ecclesiastical or public worship approved or demanded by the authority of a church or permitted in the universal church. So basically, it's not because a saint is named in the Martyrology that by that very fact the church is approving universal worship of that saint, basically. That's what he means. Thus, the simple insertion in the Martyrology could not constitute a proof that some veneration is given by the Church to such or such a person. The matter is very different with the Roman Breviary. So which is why actually, by the way, this is why I have those things, because what I was trying to find out is whether you could basically take any saint of the Martyrology and let's say have a church named after, you know, Saint so-and-so. So here I have a few decrees that speak about that. And it's not that easy, but it seems, yes, if basically if you have a saint, not a blessed, but if you have a saint and your church is named after him, you could actually say the office of him. And if you don't have like a proper, you can use the common. So anyway, there are a few rules that are given in those decrees here. I think it's easier if you just take a saint in the calendar, but you know, if you have a church named after another saint, which could happen. So, okay, the matter is very different with the Roman Breviary, which does not contain bad saints. I hope that's correct to say it like that. Basically, only saints whose worship is entirely legitimate. Benedict XIV affirms this, repeating the words of one of his predecessors. Maxime quidem, it should be, Maxime quidem auctoritas esse breviarum Romanum, in iis que per se ad cultum ecclesiasticum attinent. So it has authority in the things that belong to ecclesiastical worship. We can conclude from this that the insertion of a saint in the calendar of the Roman Breviary proves both the existence and the sanctity of the hero. So basically it's the same as canonization. It might be possible, perhaps, that the insertion of in the Martyrology would prove neither of these. Perhaps I wasn't sure how to translate that. In French, he would say "à la rigueur," meaning, well, perhaps you could concede that perhaps you could have a name of a saint in the Martyrology that actually maybe did not exist or something like that, especially for like obscure saints. But that is not the case with the Breviary. This being considered, let us listen to Benedict XIV telling us of what respect is deserving the Roman Martyrology, revised with an extreme solicitude by the Popes Gregory XIII and Urban VIII, and whose daily reading the Church prescribes to her priests in the public office. After having enumerated some of the critics made to the previous editions of the Martyrology, the immortal pontiff adds that nonobstant the clouds gathered by a science more or less sincere, nobody is allowed to conclude anything I don't know if that's a word in English, defavorable or unfavorable, unfavorable to a book thus so carefully revised and corrected. So I'm going to correct and revise this. All right. That furthermore, to pronounce anything in such a matter belongs only to the Church, and that all must await for her supreme judgment. Again, a quote from Benedict XIV. He says, concerning those things, basically, we have to say that concerning different controversies, that we do not want now to make a judgment, but we will say, however, that by those controversies, the authority of the Roman Martyrology is not diminished, because basically it is the work of so illustrious men. I mean, I'm paraphrasing what he says here, but and then he quotes somebody or refers to somebody, Florentino. He says basically that even if there are things that would deserve a correction in the Martyrology, it does not belong to anyone to act as a censor, but you always have to wait for the judgment of the Church. So basically, it's not because you do some research in the library and have your own opinion about this or that saint that you can just tell Andrew in the morning, like, hey, by the way, tomorrow don't read that one. It did not exist. Like, obviously, you cannot do that, right? So you cannot make your own corrections to the Martyrology. You have to follow the judgment of the Church on that. That should be pretty obvious. And also, we will see, like, he quotes Saint Robert Bellarmine, Baronius, and a few others who actually worked on that. Those are very learned scholars, obviously. So don't expect that in the 20th century, because you have whatever, Google Books or something, that all of a sudden you are going to, know better than they did. You would have to be pretty prideful, I would say that. A lot of intellectual pride, but like real. Besides, Benedict XIV teaches the same thing with more authority, when not anymore in the work of a private doctor, but in the Apostolic Letters destined to appear in the Bullarum. He instructs the King of Portugal about the works undertaken for the new edition of the Martyrology. It is to these Apostolic Letters, postquam intelleximus, of July 1st, 1745, that Pius IX is referring us to. So Benedict XIV rebukes the outrageous critique of some scholars who would want to redo the work of Gregory XIII, who basically had done a very thorough edition, revision of the Martyrology. As it's basically the base of what we have now. Benedict XIV did very few changes, as we will see. He blames the excessive easiness of some others to ask for reforms and corrections. And lastly, he declares himself resolute to correct only the mistakes which occurred since the works of his predecessors, and to allow only the insertions required by posterior judgments of the Church. So basically, the only thing that Benedict XIV would agree to do is, okay, make sure that when we did the copies, there were no mistakes that crept in, all right? So in Rome, I suppose they had the original, so they would just compare, make sure that there was no mistake in the other editions, and then add the new saints, basically. So in the meantime, obviously, there were canonizations, so just add the new saints, but that's it. He was not going to let any changes to be made. So now keep in mind, Benedict XIV was in the 18th century, so that was in the context of the Enlightenment. So a lot of rationalism, obviously, and supposedly, philosophy and whatever. People would pretend to know everything about everything. Pope Benedict XIV is not known to be the most I don't know how to phrase it. He was very learned, and I am not, trying to criticize him, but he's not known for his rigidity. Let's put it that way. So, just to give you an example, for example, Voltaire actually dedicated one of his works to him. Doesn't sound too good to do that, but also, to be fair though, he did that also in a way as to kind of be sneaky and be like, I respect the Holy Father. In fact, this book I dedicate to the Holy Father. And so he was somewhat diplomatic, let's say. He was more on the diplomatic side rather than on the hammer side. We'll just put it that way. But still, though, as far as those things, he was, he did not want to change anything. So he says, minime nos fugiunt, okay, let me translate that in English right away, at least not to the letter, but quickly. Basically, he knows that there are a lot of serious controversies agitated concerning the Roman Martyrology. And he says, ab alis quidem quos scientia inflet, so from those who science is inflating, meaning puffing up, by some, basically like obsession to doubt everything. And then there are others who rather would want sobriety in everything, in the sense that basically anything that would be anyway uncertain or obscure, they just want to get rid of it. And he says basically that he decided that he was going to abstain from any of this, that he proposed himself to do the necessary corrections, as we said, basically, that perhaps have crept in since the edition of Gregory XIII, and that's it. Like, he was not going to add anything or to change anything, basically. It cannot be clearer. The Pope is willing to touch the work of his predecessors only to correct mistakes made by typesetters and individuals, and to make a few insertions required by recent canonizations of saints. This is to eloquently attest of the highest esteem for the Roman Martyrology. The Pope goes further. While recognizing the right to submit possible corrections to the Apostolic See, Benedict XIV observes that, in this matter, demands of this kind have been made too lightly. So he's complaining of the fact that people, because he does not exclude the possibility that we can make correction if really somebody does a very thorough historical research and actually proves something like a change that has to be done in the Martyrology. He's fine with that, but he's not happy with the way that everybody will contest everything basically without sufficient knowledge and research. So that's basically what he's complaining about here, because people would just presume, that's the church thing, it's just legends, it's for bigots basically that know nothing. So as soon as you do a Google search, then you think you know better. That basically was the idea. It's the same as today with people in the world. They just think they know everything about everything, and they know absolutely nothing. But they think they're so smart because Wikipedia says that I don't know, the church was evil and blah blah blah. So then everybody was wrong in the Middle Ages, and they're right because Wikipedia tells them they're right. So, but they know absolutely nothing. So human nature is the same. Huh? Such is the doctrine professed by Benedict XIV, whether as a private doctor or as a pope. In his eyes, the Roman Martyrology is a purely historical book whose testimony deserves only a human faith, and which, strictly speaking, does not exclude any possibility of error. But at the same time, Benedict XIV presents to us the Roman Martyrology as holding the first place among the historical monuments deserving the belief of men, and he thinks that it is at least rash to not accept its stories. So, all right, it only has a human authority, but the people who were involved in that they were very learned and have done a lot of research and had documents that nobody else has, basically. Much more serious is the historical authority of the Roman Breviary, have we said. The reason is quite simple. It is that the insertion of a saint or a feast in the breviary has as its object the veneration of this feast or of that saint. Such an introduction is equivalent to a solemn judgment of a church. So that answers your question, Christoph. So if you have a feast introduced in the breviary, this is the same as a canonization. It is a real canonization. To insert in the breviary the feast of a Sacred Heart, for example, is tantamount to declaring that the Sacred Heart is most truly deserving the worship and adoration of the faithful. You can prove in the same way that to introduce in the breviary the name of a Christian hero is to proclaim the the sanctity of this servant of God. Hence, the accuracy of the following observation of Benedict XIV is evident, and he says, we furthermore warn that one thing is the judgment of a canonization, another thing is the introduction of a name in the Roman Martyrology, because basically he says that they cannot have an error in the judgment of a canonization, while you may perhaps have one forte, perhaps in the Roman Martyrology. One understands indeed that the responsibility of the Church is not engaged in the same way in a pious reading as it is in the object of public veneration. Hence, the fact of the introduction in the Roman Breviary is an irrefutable proof of the existence and of the sanctity of the person who has deserved such an honor. Doubt in this regard is not allowed. It would be an insult to the infallibility of the Holy Church. But if it is forbidden to raise the slightest controversy concerning the place occupied by the saints in the ecclesiastical calendar, is it not allowed to discuss the circumstances narrated in the legends of the breviary? So basically the lessons of the second nocturne, where you have a short biography of a saint. So every day you have 3 lessons that gives you, in the second nocturne, gives you like a short biography of a saint of the day. That's how it works. All right. So we have it every day in the breviary. So the question is basically, would it be allowed to doubt about, a fact which is narrated in the lessons of the breviary concerning the life of a saint? Yes, indeed. And we hasten to add that neither the Roman Church nor her most zealous defenders have claimed an infallible certainty for the breviary. So it's not that the life of a saint becomes like a dogma of faith, obviously. In itself, corrections could be made and so forth and so on. It has a historical authority, but it's a very strong historical authority. So here he quotes Cardinal Duperre, who, funnily enough, was actually answering the King of Great Britain, as you can see in the footnote. But anyway, he says, whose lessons do not have the same certainty as the scriptures, we do not therefore believe them with theological faith as we do for the scriptures, but only with a historical and moral faith. Nonetheless, they are so authentic, and the books of those who have written martyrologies justify them so clearly that anyone who would like to endeavor to show the public office of a church, that the public office of a church contains fables, would be strongly impeded. So basically, good luck. If you want to show the breviary wrong, good luck, because it's not something written by 8 years old. It's actually very serious. So that's basically what he's saying. What I would say, however, also is that according to the principles that we have covered in class, obviously there cannot be anything scandalous or evil or whatever in those lessons, basically. That the church cannot, in those lessons, give you anything disedifying, obviously. But, whether that saint did truly go to that place to make his studies, for example, because usually, in the life of a saint, they will tell you, yes, he went to study to Paris or he went to Padua or something like that. Could it be wrong? Strictly speaking, it could, but again, nobody knows better than the church as to what happened. So, discussion is therefore allowed under the condition of being serious, modest, and respectful. Let us listen to Benedict XIV. He says, again, let me translate that quickly. It seems that we can basically assert safely that the things that are related and approved in the Roman Breviary have not a small weight of authority. He says, who can doubt this? Who can doubt this? Since it is certain that the Roman Breviary has been revised and corrected many times by men of such piety and doctrine, basically. He says, however, it is not. We cannot say that it is forbidden to what is it in English? Basically, with fitting modesty and serious foundation to explain or to discuss of the historical facts. But you always have to present that to the Holy See. So then we go back to Montrousier, who says, if the scholar is not disposed to accept blindly the work of revisers, such as Sirlet, Bellarmine, Baronius, and so forth, so here I don't know how to translate that in English, but I put as he wishes in the sense, okay, if he wants to basically research it and, okay, fine for him. The church does not impose on him a trust which, in that case, would not actually be repugnant, even the most severe criticism. Basically, even if the church were to impose that, it would not be that bad in the sense that this is so serious a work, basically. Let him only remember to begin the discussion not with a polemic attitude of dispute, but with the modest attitude of one seeking the truth. Debita cum modestia ad gravi fundamento. As examples of freedom of discussion relative to the legends of the breviary, Benedict XIV mentions the baptism of Constantine. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically it's disputed as to whether he, among historians, don't ask me, but it's disputed whether he converted and got baptized actually a little, just shortly before he died, or did he got baptized earlier. I'm not going to get into that controversy, but this is what he's alluding to. The three Mary Magdalene, so that's something from the Gospel, whether the woman was the same as the one who was forgiven by our Lord, blah, blah, blah. Of Saint Dionysius of Paris, so some people thought that he would not be Saint Dionysius of Athens, but whatever, don't get me started on that. On which questions he affirms that the patience of scholars may exercise itself safely. So he's fine with people discussing that as long as they are respectful. However, let us not think that Benedict XIV himself did ever use the freedoms he so generously grants to others. So basically, he conceded that perhaps you could discuss those things, but he himself does not actually. We'll see that in many times when he's doing some research, he just says, the church says this, and he quotes a breviary, and that's it. For him, that's an argument, and end of the story. So the words that we have read attest no doubt to the highest esteem of the Roman breviary, but his conduct shows it even more. If we were to follow him in his scholarly research, we would see him always stand by the affirmation of the legend. So, for example, when discussing the acquired or infused science of the saints, Benedict XIV narrates without any hesitation the legend of Saint Katherine, Virgin and Martyr, so that's celebrated on November 25th. The philosophers should know that because you get a day off, because she's the patron saint of philosophers. So, whose legend was laughed out without restraint by most of the scholars of his age. People thought that was ridiculous. I don't know why, but whatever. That because she was a young girl and she refuted all of the scholars of the emperor, and she was killed for that. She actually converted a number of them also, if I'm not mistaken. Like she actually convinced them that the true religion was the Catholic religion. So the emperor was a little bit upset with that. When characterizing the nature of the mode of inspiration of the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius, Benedict XIV refers once more to the breviary. So he says basically, De illis sancta mater ecclesia serit, and then he just quotes the breviary. For him, that's enough. He considers what is contained in the breviary as argument of authority. To the question as to whether the Magi came from the Far East that's badly put, sorry. Coming from the Far East were kings. Basically, people are debating the Magi, were they kings or not, or just wise people? So he, Benedict XIV, answers clearly in the affirmative, based on the fact that the church in the breviary applies to them the verse Reges Tarsis from Psalm 71. So he says, they are kings, yes, obviously, otherwise the verse wouldn't make any sense. That's what he says. What was the color of the wine miraculously changed at the wedding of Cana? Benedict XIV teaches that the water was changed into red wine, since the authority of the breviary left him without any doubt on this question. And here he says, Et sane ecclesia canit, aquae rubescunt idrie. So we actually sing that. It's part of the Crudelis Herodes Quittimes, I think, the hymn of Epiphany, right? Don't know a second. So quoad coloris mutationem refertur. So in the hymn it says the waters rubescunt idrie. So rubescunt means like to actually it's blush in English, but meaning you become red. So the water actually also did that. They became red, which means Bordeaux. Nah, I don't know. It just means red wine, he says. And then, when the Magi arrived in Bethlehem, did they find our Lord in the stable, or did they adore him in the house where the Holy Family would have moved to, as could indicate the word domus used in the Gospel? This question is highly disputed among scholars. Benedict XIV follows the breviary, which mentions the stable. Odie stella magos duxit ad praesepe. So for him, that's it. I think again, I think it's on the hymn too, no? I don't know. Let us admit that it would be difficult to conceive of a deeper respect for the Roman breviary and its historical narrations. There is more. So, how it doesn't mean necessarily you. I mean, again, he's not saying that could not be disputed, but he himself, being very learned, would follow that. Basically, for him, that was so strong that he would just follow that. So that means if you want to dispute that, you have to be like above Benedict XIV as far as scholarship. So, see you in 40 years. At least, if even. Let us admit that it would be difficult to conceive. Okay, sorry, there is more. Benedict XIV would give an immense value to the legends of the particular breviaries and propers when these are granted the formal approbation of the Holy See. Thus, for example, discussing the truth of the famous indulgence of the Portiuncula indulgence. Sorry, that's a little bit redundant. The famous Portiuncula indulgence. He brings as an irrefutable proof the legend of the Franciscan breviary. He says, "Ad celebris suius facti probatione." So to prove this famous fact, it should be enough for everyone, the authority of the Church, which in the said Franciscan breviary, the lesson of the said Franciscan breviary, has inserted and I don't know how to put that. Basically, it was introduced in the breviary. Cum exploratum sit, quanta cautione, with a lot of precaution and attention, quanta diligentia, with a lot of diligence and consideration, with which the Church behave in such matters. I repeat, it is not possible to conceive of greater deference and veneration for the Roman breviary. Nonetheless, there are some men who dare to say, Benedict XIV believed that the Roman breviary was full of fables. So I guess people would say that of him. I don't know, never heard that, but if you do, then you can answer back saying, false. Is it ignorance? Is it lightness? I do not know. Rings a bell. Such manners of speaking and acting should certainly be done away with, because they ruin in the souls of the faithful the respect for the things of the Church, obviously. Like if you can just put into doubt anything, where do you stop? I mean, if you doubt about the breviary or the Martyrology, where do you stop? You can doubt everything, little by little. Say, well, actually there were diaconesses in the early church, and this and that, and the priests were married, and blah, 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 like the modernists do today. If you begin to doubt something, then... because you know better, obviously, in 20th century, in 21st century. All right, so the conclusion is not there, but basically it wraps up the article. Let me see if there is anything. He's basically encouraging France to to continue the work done by Don Guéranger and others, Darras also, who wrote a history, to basically defend the traditions of the Church. And he's complaining or rebuking the Jansenists and the Gallicans, who would put all of those things into doubts. Okay, and then he emphasizes once more that in itself, discussion about those things is not excluded as far as the legends, the historical facts and all of this, but with a lot of respect, and obviously you need to be really learned. So in practical order, not for us. Okay, we can pray.